Hello, my name is Brian Clark. I'm an editor with the Modesto Bee, and welcome to today's 2020 general election discussion featuring the Congressional District 10. Our guest today is Congressman Josh Harder. We invited Ted Howes, the Republican candidate, who denied our request. Garth Stapley, our Bee Opinions editor, will be moderating today's discussion. He'll be joined by our editorial board, myself, managing editor Patty Guerra, and Bee Research and Information Specialist Maria Figueroa. Garth, take it away.
All right. Well, it's been mentioned that today's single candidate forum is something like an open chair interview. Obviously, we can't show an empty Zoom screen to represent the no-show of Mr. Harder's opponent, but we can describe our efforts to have both candidates participate in a debate, answering questions from the Modesto Bee's editorial board, as well as from people throughout the 10th Congressional District. Voter suggestions are always considered and frequently included in our candidate forums on all political levels. These are the relevant facts. On January the 22nd, before the COVID pandemic, this editorial board hosted the memorable and successful debate at the state, featuring all 6 candidates running at that time in the March primary for the 10th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. This event was held at the venerable State Theater in downtown Modesto, and every available audience seat was filled. Mr. Harder and candidate Ted Howes participated, and the event featured spirited discussion of issues important to our region and to their campaigns. Because Harder and Howes both received more votes than the others in March, both advanced to the November runoff, and in March, both campaigns expressed interest in coming together again in the fall for another debate before the November election. On August 19, Mr. Howes' campaign manager sent word notifying us that Mr. Howes would not participate. We now proceed with an interview of the incumbent, Representative Josh Harder. Mr. Harder, you have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for hosting this and actually for hosting all of the candidate interviews that you have. I've really enjoyed watching many of them. My story here is very simple. I never thought I'd run for office, but decided to because I was so frustrated that the Valley was being consistently ignored by DC and Sacramento. People were putting partisanship and special interests ahead of working together and really getting things done. And there's no issue where that's more clear than healthcare. I ran because my brother David and 100,000 other people in our district would have been kicked off their insurance if protections for pre-existing conditions were removed. Folks showed up, they voted in 2018, they showed how critical healthcare was and so many other issues in our district. That fight remains. We have to continue to do everything we can to make sure that folks have affordable and accessible care in the Valley, that we're fighting to make sure that there's more high-paying jobs here. I've done things very focused on being accessible, being independent, and really getting things done. I've held 18 in-person town halls last year before the pandemic hit. This year have done 9 remote, including 1 drive-in town hall, and sponsored more bipartisan bills than anybody else in Congress, and have actually succeeded at a number of efforts, including getting the first funding for a new water project in our district in over 50 years. So I'm working hard. I hope to continue to deliver for the Valley, and I ask for the votes of your readers, or I guess viewers in this case, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Very briefly, what are your thoughts about last night's presidential debate?
Well, I'm still processing it, but overall, I thought it was appalling. I think if anybody wasn't awake before, hopefully it served as a wake-up call to help people understand the stakes of this election. I never expected the President of the United States would fail to condemn white supremacy, but ultimately, I think the debate last night and this election in general is very clear. It's between Joe Biden, an architect of the Affordable Care Act, which created, like I said, the opportunity for 100,000 people in this district to have health insurance, including my little brother, and a choice between him and Donald Trump, who recently nominated a Supreme Court justice who would eliminate those protections. And that's ultimately what this race comes down to. I hope that our community is going to recognize that on the issues that matter most, healthcare, jobs, and frankly, based on what we saw last night, human decency, that this choice really isn't all that complicated.
Thank you.
There's a perception that your opponent has more campaign signs than you, posted in yards and throughout the community. We even topic. Given your considerable resources, why is this?
I don't know if other folks, I didn't hear the entire question, Maria. Can you just repeat it?
Of course. There is a perception that your opponent has more campaign signs than you, posted in yards and lots throughout the community. We've even had a number of letters about this topic. Given your considerable resources, why is this?
Sure. So a couple things. One is that there's a lot of campaign vandalism, unfortunately, that's going on. I wish it weren't the case. It feels like petty politics to send people around to go destroy signs, but I can't tell you how many people have called me up and saying that, you know, they're on their like 8th yard sign at this point because the first 7 were destroyed. And we've seen that across our district. But we're going to keep putting them up. We're going to keep doing our best, and we're certainly not engaging in that activity. But more importantly, I think what was successful for our campaign in 2018 was one-on-one in-person conversations. You know, we had 10,000 volunteers. We made a million phone calls, and that made all the difference. It tripled the number of youth voters, more than doubled the minority of minority voters showing up in our district compared to the last midterm. And that's kind of continued to be our focus, making sure that we're having those one-on-one conversations. Even if we can't be showing up at somebody's doorstep, we can be doing it on the phone, on text, and trying to make sure that we're actually having those in-person conversations, which I think are far more impactful. And that's what I think the 2018 election proved.
Thank you. 2 nursing homes in your hometown of Turlock have produced a combined 280 positive tests for COVID-19 among residents and staff, and a combined 44 residents of these 2 elder care homes have died. What have you done to address the virus in nursing homes?
What we've seen in nursing homes is horrifying. And what happened is the pandemic spread like wildfire amongst these nursing homes. Because they are senior citizens that often have other health conditions in close quarters, and the Turlock Nursing and Rehabilitation, which is less than 1 mile away from my home, we had a situation where, you know, 1 employee got sick, led to, as you said, over 100 positive cases and counting. And then we've seen that situation in other nursing homes across our district. We've worked on a number of fronts. For one, as soon as this pandemic started, I created the Central Valley PPE initiative alongside Republicans and Democrats across our community, including Assemblyman Heath Flora, who has been a really incredible ally, trying to make sure that our folks on the front lines are getting the masks, the gowns that they need. I actually went after Turlock Nursing and Rehabilitation had those cases. I went personally there, dropped off masks, gowns, other protective equipment, which was sorely needed, as well as to other nursing homes across our area. We've now delivered tens of thousands of masks, over 60,000 masks, other face shields, and other critical equipment. We've also been focused on what we can do to make sure that we're getting this virus under control in nursing homes specifically. I have introduced legislation, the Nursing Home Safety Act, which is around making sure that we're prioritizing testing for staff members and residents, as well as making people aware. One of the things that happened early on is family members and loved ones of nursing home residents didn't even get notified when there was a positive case in their facility. So we need to make sure that those notifications are happening, and we need to make sure that there is prioritized testing happening in those facilities. And then finally, we need to get them the help that they need. A lot of these nursing home employees that I've spoken to are doing their best, but they are not COVID experts. That's not their job. They need help. And so one of the things that is in our bill is an effort to create individual task forces across all 50 states with experienced nurses and doctors that can go in to nursing homes that may be, having challenges, and making sure that they are putting the safety protocols necessary to identify where this virus is happening and getting it under control. I don't fault somebody that's maybe making a minimum wage, that is doing their best. And many times, by the way, these nursing home employees are scared to go into work because they don't want to get sick and make their families sick as well. We have to get them the help that they need, the tests, the protective equipment, and the training to make sure that these nursing homes can keep our loved ones safe.
Josh, are you surprised that Mr. Howes refused to participate in the Modesto Bee debate?
I don't know if I'd say I'm surprised. Look, I mean, I think at its core, politics is about showing up and being accessible. And that's one of the priorities that we've made. And I think it frankly probably shouldn't come as a shock that somebody who has a record that I think is indefensible, that doesn't reflect the values of our community, is too embarrassed to show up in front of voters and talk about what he believes in. I think his values are pretty antithetical to the ones that the Valley holds, whether it's some of the racist and bigoted comments that he's made, or whether it's based on the fact that he says he wouldn't support the CARES Act, which saved 70,000 jobs in our area. If he had his way, Ted Howes had his way, those 70,000 jobs would have been lost in the Valley. He also has said that he wants to raise the retirement age to 70. I'd like to hear him defend that point of view. I don't think it's particularly defensible in an area where so many of our seniors already live Social Security paycheck to paycheck. So, you know, I can't talk about what his decisions, but I can tell you that the first job of any public servant is to show up in every single area across your community, answer questions from the media, from voters, and making sure that you understand the concerns of your community. And that's something that we've obviously tried to prioritize. Just a couple weeks ago, I did, I think, one of the first drive-in town halls in the country. I certainly haven't seen of any others. And we had hundreds of folks coming into a drive-in movie theater in Turlock. Lots of questions. You can, watch it all.
We'll give you plenty of chances to talk about that a little
all right.
Let's try to keep our answers
Sure.
real succinct here.
All right, sorry about that.
More questions.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
Maria.
Sure. What has been your response to the growing problem of wildfires here in California?
Well, look, these wildfires have to come under control. What we have seen across our community this year and last year cannot be the new normal. It's not an acceptable way to live, both with the wildfires and with the smoke. I had the opportunity to go up with the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department recently, survey the damage that happened over in Del Puerto Canyon and Diablo Grande. And it's terrifying to see, and I'm sure you can see pictures of this. The fires came all the way to I-5. If they had gone another mile, that they would have threatened the cities of Patterson, Newman, some of our major population areas across Stanislaus County. It's scary. And so we have to do two things. One is we have to address the reality of climate change. The reason that we are having more and more wildfires and more droughts for that reason is because climate change is real. It's with us. And we have to make sure that we are putting in place the types of protections that can make sure that the rising temperatures we've seen across the valley this year don't continue to rise. I introduced the Farm Act, which is focused on agricultural sustainability, identifying things like how do we put a methane digester on every single dairy farm in America or every single dairy farm just in California. If we did that just across our state, it's the equivalent of taking 5 million cars off the road. And then second, in addition to climate change, we have to do a better job of forest maintenance. We have really failed on this, especially from a federal government perspective, which manages a lot of our forests across California. We aren't doing enough controlled burns to make sure that there is less kindling for these fires to take hold. And that's something that we need to address. And then the third thing I'll mention is actually today, I introduced the Wildfire Smoke Safety Act, which is all around trying to make sure that we're using FEMA resources to help people, especially folks with underlying health conditions, with masks and respirators to deal with all the smoke that's been around our community. It's certainly not an acceptable way to live, and this cannot be the new normal across the valley.
Thank you. You mentioned Mr. Howes a bit ago, and some of the things he said were a little harsh. He's also, done some good, hasn't he? I mean, Operation Compassion has given away a lot of food. There's been bread giveaways. They've done graffiti cleanups. Do you have anything good to say about these efforts? And what are you doing to help people during this time?
Sure, absolutely. I think anything that any member of our community, including Mr. House, has done to help folks that are in need, I think is a very good thing. I'm simply pointing out that's pretty hypocritical to help people that have lost their job when you also say that you would have opposed legislation that would have saved, that did save 70,000 jobs across our district with the CARES Act. And so, I think we should expect folks that, walk the walk and talk the talk, and don't just, like to take photo ops, but actually like to create real change for the Valley. We've been focused on a number of different things. I mentioned the PPE initiative, where I'm really proud of the Valley stepping up, donating 60,000 masks across our district. It's a really exciting initiative, and great to see Republicans and Democrats, legislators up and down the ballot supporting each other, trying to make sure that our hospitals, clinics, nursing homes are getting the protective equipment to the folks on the front lines. And then we've also been very focused. When this pandemic began, I refocused all of my campaign team towards working at our shelters and some of our areas where we're trying to make sure that there is a food going to folks in need at our food banks. I myself have volunteered in food banks in every single city in our district. We passed out meals in Turlock, in Modesto, and Tracy, Manteca, and those efforts are really important. And we have to make sure that we're continuing to get help that folks need. The Valley is hurting. I often say the country sneezes, we catch a cold. We're the first place to suffer in an economic recession, the last to recover, and we're seeing that today. And we need to make sure that we're supporting folks on the ground, supporting our wonderful nonprofits, getting them volunteers. And then we also need to make sure that there's more federal support. We passed the CARES Act in March. It's been 6 months. We need to make sure that there's more support for these nonprofits, which are really straining, and for the cities and counties that are making sure that folks can continue to pay their rent and put food on the table.
Thank you.
Josh, what are you doing to protect Social Security and Medicare?
Just that. We are doing everything we can to support Social Security and Medicare. I think it's important to understand that these are benefits, not entitlements, as Ted House has called them. My parents are nearing retirement. They're going to rely on these programs like millions of other Americans. And I strongly believe that if you have paid into Social Security your entire life, then you have a right to that money when you retire. It's simply that simple. And I think one of the bills that I've sponsored is called the Social Security 2100 Act, which is focused on ensuring that Social Security remains solvent until at least 2100. And the way that it does that is it makes sure that every person actually has to pay into it. Right now, above a certain income level, millionaires don't pay in to Social Security. That's not right. If we make sure that every American pays in to Social Security in a fair way, then we can actually not only keep Social Security solvent, we can also increase benefits to the folks, which are really critical in our area where so many folks are living Social Security and paycheck to paycheck. And I would compare that to my opponent, who has said publicly that one of his goals is to raise the age of retirement to 70, which I think is simply unacceptable and would put a lot of seniors in our area in a very difficult place.
Thank you.
The 10th Congressional District is considered purple, meaning part red and part blue, with no overwhelming party majority. Describe where you fall from left to right on the political spectrum, and also where you see your opponent.
Well, I think that's fair. I think most of the issues that the Central Valley faces, whether it's water, jobs, healthcare, they're not Democrat or Republican issues. They're issues that are focused on the good of the Valley. And most of the legislators that I admire in the Central Valley's history have been more focused on the needs of our community than they have about kowtowing to party bosses on one side or the other. And that's exactly the response that we've tried to take. I get breakfast every week in non-COVID times when we can do that with 25 Democrats, 25 Republicans. It's a really important group because just last week we released a bill on a compromise stimulus negotiation, which looks like it's gaining a lot of steam in Washington. But that's also one of the ways that we got a bill passed and signed into law to make sure that Vietnam veterans affected by Agent Orange had their disability benefits covered when they hadn't been covered for decades, since the Vietnam War. And so, you know, I'm very proud of my record. I've sponsored more bills with Republicans than any other Democrat in the country. And that's, I think, the only way that we can actually move forward. I think the country would be a lot better off if we had more purple districts like Modesto and like the Central Valley, and fewer districts that sort of push people away from each other and don't actually create opportunities to collaborate and get things done.
Josh, describe your attempts to help small business during the pandemic.
Describe
your attempts to help small businesses during the pandemic.
Well, not attempts. I mean, we've done a lot to support small businesses. There's two important things to note. One is small businesses have just gotten crushed throughout this pandemic. It would have been one thing if we went into a shutdown for a month or two, and then we were able to get this pandemic under control and get people back to work, but that's obviously not what's happened. And there are so many businesses across our community that have struggled. My dad, you know, runs Harder Optometry in Modesto, has 5 employees. He struggled a lot paying his bills, just like every other small business owner across our community and frankly across our country. There's two things that have happened that are important. One is in the CARES Act, there was the Paycheck Protection Program, which gave forgivable loans to small businesses that need it. We have evidence that's very clear that has saved 70,000 jobs across the valley. Saved 5 jobs in my dad's work, and many other examples across the valley. That was incredibly important. However, that's also money that went out in March, and we're now many months later, and small businesses continue to suffer. And so the second thing that I focused on is I was a big supporter of legislation to make sure that the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program was open to agricultural businesses when it never has been before. That was a lifeline for many of our small businesses that need it. I recently talked to a dairy farmer in Turlock who told me that he would have gone under, declared bankruptcy, if he had not gotten the EIDL program that we secured. We've lost 90 dairy farms across Stanislaus and San Joaquin County. It would have been 91 if we had not gotten that across the finish line. But obviously, so much work is necessary. We still have small businesses getting hammered on a daily basis. And so that's why the bill that I'm going to vote for in just an hour or so, is focused on a second stimulus that is all around identifying the businesses that have seen a 50% drop in revenue or more and getting them supplemental help. Because those are the folks, the restaurants that are still at 10% capacity or 25% capacity that continue to struggle, and we can't be in a position where they all go under. Not only would that hurt the owners, that's going to hurt all the employees that are going to be on the unemployment rolls if we don't actually get this right.
Thank you.
Editorial board, I'm a little concerned that we're going to run overtime. The congressman obviously can talk about any issue, and he has, and he's answered a bunch of the questions that we had prepared already. So I'm going to ask for a little bit more, I guess, permission to move through some of these questions that he's already answered. For example, the one that I was about to ask was about responsible use of social media. Congressman, you already mentioned your opponent's use of social media. Was there anything else you wanted to say in like 20 seconds about that?
Look, don't take my word for it. Listen to the head of the California Republican Party, who called my opponent's comments disgusting and disgraceful. Listen to the National Republican Party, which has refused to endorse him and pulled support for him. Ultimately, I don't think that comparing immigrants to pedophiles, I don't think coming up with the bigoted and hateful statements that he's made is reflective of the Republican Party, and it's certainly not reflective of the values of this district.
Thank you. I think we're going to skip the next question. It was about healthcare, and you've already addressed that. The next question was sort of about transparency and accountability, and we sort of wanted you to contrast your approach to that of your predecessor and also your opponent. Could you do that in just a few seconds?
Sure. Well, look, I mean, I won't say what their approaches are, but I'll say, I've made a priority to show up in this district. Many people in this district have my cell phone number. Anybody's welcome to give me a call anytime, talk about the issues that are most important to them. And then I've also tried to make a priority to not expect people to come to me. We are a district where one of the biggest challenges is people that feel that they are disconnected from the political process, that politics doesn't matter to them. And oftentimes, they're right. Politics does not actually accomplish all that it promises to do for so many people in the Central Valley. And so I have made it a priority to go out to people, both by doing town halls, by doing one-on-one office hours, and by trying to make sure that I'm as accessible as possible in this entire district as much as we can be. And I take the title of representative very seriously. It's not just that title, it is a job description of how you have to make sure that you're listening to every person across our community, whether they or not. I'm here to work hard for them.
Thank you. Brian, could you ask your next question, please?
Well, I was going to ask, go down to voter fraud and just how concerned you are about voter fraud.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not deeply concerned about it. Obviously, we have to make sure that there are precautions in place, but I think our county registrar has done an exhaustive investigation of what's happened in previous elections in Stanislaus County, has had no evidence of voter fraud, as well as the Secretary of State in California has done the opposite. And I think we need to make sure that everybody has faith in our basic democratic institutions. And things aren't going to look that different this year. It may feel a little different, but ultimately, 80% of our district got a vote by mail ballot in 2018. This time it's going to be 100% of the district, but those processes are going to work basically the same. And obviously, if there is any voter fraud, we should absolutely identify it, crack down on it. But I am very concerned about the indirect voter suppression that happens when you cast doubt and you try to muddy the waters on our democratic processes. This is a really important election, and I can tell you that I am more concerned about the tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of voters just in our district that are going to stay home because they're apathetic or cynical about the political process. And I think we have to really keep those folks in mind about making sure that they feel engaged and understand that they have a voice in this process as well.
Thank you.
Let's follow up on that and just ask something that some of our readers have been confused about or perhaps have questions about. What do you think about letting non-citizens vote in an election?
Non-citizens cannot vote in an election, not now, not ever. You have to be an American citizen to be registered, to get a ballot, and there are a number of different safeguards at the county registrar's office, in the Secretary of State's office, to make sure that those ballots are going to the right people and that only the votes of American citizens are being counted, which is in the Constitution and it's the law.
Lastly, we've asked every candidate what their personal approach is to wearing a mask when you're in public. Can you share us your thoughts?
I wear a mask. It's not just about protecting me. It's about protecting our community. And we've seen the evidence on masks is overwhelming, not just in this country, but across the globe. There are a lot of countries that have this pandemic under far better control than we do. And one of the reasons for that is they have pretty good mask adherence. And so, I think as a public leader, one of the jobs is to set a good example. And I'm going to continue to listen to our scientists and our doctors and make sure that I'm presenting the best example possible of what the best science suggests.
Very good. Let's have a 1-minute closing statement, if you would.
Sure. Well, thank you guys so much for doing this. It has been, I think, always a pleasure. I came into office with a couple concrete goals. First, making sure that I can show up for this district, listening to a district that felt like their voice was often ignored. That's exactly what we've done, not just with our 18 town halls last year or our town halls this year that had to be remote and over the phone, as well as our drive-in town hall, trying to find every creative method we could to make sure that I'm hearing directly from ordinary folks across our district, one person at a time. I've also been focused on being independent and not just listening to one party or the other, but focusing on the needs of the Valley, sponsoring more bills with Republicans than any other Democrat in the country. And that's not by compromising on my values, that's by trying to identify areas of common ground and getting things done. And that's my third goal, is getting things done, because God knows we need it. We need it now more than ever when we're dealing with a pandemic, we're dealing with wildfires, we've seen tens of thousands of people out of work. And I'm proud of what we've accomplished. We didn't talk about water, but that is one of the most important ingredients of the long-term viability and success of the Central Valley economy. And I was so proud that after decades of having paralyzed fights between environmentalists and farmers, I was able to secure the first water funding in 50 years for a new water project in our district, not just for one, but for 4 water projects across our area that are going to help make sure that we continue to have a vibrant ag economy in the future. We've also made sure that we're extending health benefits to Vietnam veterans affected by Agent Orange. That's a really important issue, very personal to me, as my grandfather served in Vietnam, was affected by Agent Orange. And then third, making sure that we're getting more high-paying jobs to the Valley. We have tens of thousands of people out of work. The Paycheck Protection Program saved 70,000 of those jobs, but we have to go much further. We have to make sure that we're rebuilding and rebuilding stronger. And our priority has been focusing on education programs, making sure that just because you, and the like. Sorry, did I go over?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. That'll do. This concludes our candidates forum for the 10th Congressional District. We appreciate incumbent Josh Harder discussing these issues from Washington, D.C. with the Modesto Bee. Viewers, be sure to check modbee.com to see all of the Modesto Bee's debates featuring candidates on all levels of government. These forums are available for viewing through the November 3rd election. At modbee.com, you will find debates for Modesto Mayor, 3 open Modesto City Council seats, 2 seats on the Stanislaus County Board of Supervisors, State Senate, Ceres Mayor, Patterson Mayor, Turlock City Council, and the Modesto Irrigation District. The Modesto Bee will announce endorsements of all these races starting Sunday, October 4th, this coming Sunday. We intend to release 1 endorsement each succeeding day through October 12th, and all will appear at modbee.com and in our newspaper. Thank you and good day.